welcome, I'm the LegendaryPokéMaster, and today we're talking a little bit about Kanto. As we all know, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are coming out, and those are remakes of the Kanto games. That said, a lot of people are saying Kanto is a bit overrated for having that much attention. So today, hopefully we can see if their claims can be validated. So without further ado, let's start. So first I would like to clarify. When I'm talking about Kanto, I'm talking about everything the region has to offer. That is in terms of Pokemon it contains, the story it delivers, the pacing of the region, and what you can do in it. But the first point, the Pokemon, is arguably the most important, so let's talk about it first. As we all know from propaganda, the first generation of Pokemon, and in turn Kanto, holds 151 Pokemon for you to collect and discover. Concerning the sheer amount of Pokemon, Kanto actually does pretty well, as 151 Pokemon introduced in a single region is only ousted by Unova, which debuted 156. But when we actually break down the Pokemon in this generation, we basically have three categories. Massively overpowered God-tier Pokemon, trash Pokemon, and very trash Pokemon. Let me specify what each of these are. The massively overpowered God tier is pretty self-explanatory, and you can probably guess who's in this. This part includes, but is not limited to, stuff like the fully evolved starters, Dragonite, Snorlax, Alakazam, and the legendary Pokemon of Kanto. They all have really high stats, good moves and typings, and have lasted throughout the generations as some of the most powerful Pokemon you can pick. When I looked at all the native evolution lines of Kanto, I'd estimate that these Pokemon constitute about a third of the original 151. Then we move to the next tier down, the trash Pokemon. These are all Pokemon that seem pretty underwhelming in the game, which are things like Flareon, Persian, Dodrio, Pinsir, etc. Now don't get me wrong, these Pokemon aren't necessarily trash per se. In fact, many of these Pokemon got buffs way afterwards, such as in Generation 6 and 7, and those make them very viable in contemporary competitive settings. But in this context of Generation 1 games, and even to an extent their Generation 3 remakes, with the existence of that higher tier I just talked about, the comparison is basically like choosing between a gold bar and that brick over there. This portion is about half of the 151. Then we have the remaining 17-ish%, the very trash Pokemon. I don't even need to explain this, you know what's here. Now this scale is a generalization, obviously there are outliers like Pokemon that fall between God tier and trash, and Pokemon that go even farther below very trash. But 1/3 being OP as heck in this generation is actually pretty good, especially when compared to generations like 2 and 6, which I'd say only have about 1/4 of this. However, those generations do have more of those Pokemon that I mentioned that are outliers. So overall, I'd only consider Kanto a slightly above average region in terms of Pokemon that it has. Next, we'll talk about the actual geography of the region itself. The format of Kanto is the type we see in several other Pokemon games in a wagon wheel kind of shape, where routes radiate out of and encircle a major city in the region. We see this in Kanto as well as Hoenn, Unova, and Kalos. This design makes travel relatively easy when compared to a place like Alola, minus the ability to fly. However, of the regions that follow this design, Kanto definitely doesn't come out on top. A lot of its paths are narrow, specific places are pretty annoying to get through without fly, which, mind you, you don't get until you're like halfway through the game. And some of the so-called routes are like 10 feet long. Compare this to a region like Kalos, which, while its story was, still delivered on decently spaced cities and routes that were, and this is my transition to my next point, aesthetically pleasing. This could be completely opinionated, but Kanto's routes feel, off, to say the least. I don't really know what it is, to be honest. Maybe it's that they feel kind of enclosed in comparison with many other regions, or that some are abnormally short and others long and tedious. On top of that, most tend to seem generic in their visual approach. Don't get me wrong, there are those charming places in Kanto that every Pokemon game has. It's just that this region seems to have a lot less enjoyable routes than most, at least for me. Alternatively, the cities! The cities here are good. We've got Saffron, Lavender, Fuchsia, Vermilion. They all have very nice designs that suit what goes on there. However, the routes do still bring that overall feel of the region down for me. I suppose Kanto does have an excuse in that it was the first region ever designed, but they could have at least spruced up the looks a bit and Fire Red and Leaf Green, which I don't really think they did. Unfortunately, this problem might even persist into Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee based on what we've seen so far. I mean, look at this! You look at this and don't tell me that the scaling looks really weird. So overall, I'd give the design of Kanto a pass concerning the region design and layout, but in my opinion, it falls short of many subsequent Pokemon settings. Finally, we'll talk about the story that takes place within Kanto. But Austin, you shouldn't generalize the story as part of the region, since the story can change from game to game to game. Yes. However, no matter what, due to Kanto's design, all the stories that take place within it will always contain some general elements. So let's talk about those. In Kanto, you play as Bred, a new trainer who starts out from his home in Pallet Town and eventually becomes the Pokemon Master of the Pokemon League. Okay, now did you hear that? Starts out from his home in Pallet Town and eventually becomes the Pokemon Master of the Pokemon League. That is what I like about the story in Kanto. Notice how I didn't say, he goes from his humble beginnings, becomes a contest star, and then wins the league. Or, he beats the island challenge and breaks the universe a little bit. No. Instead, Kanto gives you a realistic, fun story that keeps you engaged throughout. Your goal is pretty clear. Beat the 8 gyms and become the Pokemon champion. Along the way, you encounter Team Rocket, a fiendish gang out to make money off of Pokemon. No time warping involved. They're just here to commit illegal activities similar to what we see in the real world. This makes the story more relatable, and more than any other Pokemon game in my opinion, it makes the Pokemon world feel a little bit more real, since everything that's happening, aside from, you know, intelligible fighting creatures and free hospitals, seems to mirror the real world. This consequently makes the game more engaging for the player. That player being me, because for all I know, I'm the only person who has this opinion. Kanto delivers the original Pokemon adventure, and I appreciate it greatly for delivering on that in an untainted way. So, what is the verdict? Is Kanto deserving of the overwhelming love it receives? No! Although the region has its charms, it still has many shortcomings and collectively offers about as much as the subsequent Pokemon titles, all of which have better graphics, systems to play on, more Pokemon, etc. But hey, as long as the overwhelming support doesn't kill anyone, keep it coming. Although the region is apparently overrated, that doesn't mean it shouldn't be celebrated for its strengths that it does have. But at the end of the day, this is all based on my stance, and as we know, stances are so different that they made an entire YouTube feature about debating against them. So go ahead and use that feature to voice your opinion about Kanto. If you're feeling like seeing more videos like this, you can also subscribe. Regardless, it's been 2 months, and I will see you in the next video.